Welcome to the Nick Blevins Family Ministry Podcast. Our goal is to help you maximize your church's potential. You'll hear from top leaders in children's, student, and family ministry about the principles and practices they use. Now here's your host, Nick Blevins.
Hey everyone, welcome to episode 185 of the Family Ministry Podcast. I'm Nick, I'm your host, and today we actually talk with Jarrod Harris, who leads children's ministry at Mission Church in Arizona, and you might be familiar with that church because that's where Kenny Conley leads, and we've had Kenny on the podcast many times, as well as some of his student staff and things like that. What you probably don't know about Jarrod is that in addition to leading there, he's actually the person that puts this podcast together. So you can thank Jarrod for the show notes and how it all comes together and, maybe covering up my many mistakes and things like that. So super appreciate Jarrod. Loved working with him on the podcast, as well as a number of other projects like at Ministry Boost. He's an instructor for us. And we're going to talk about his course called Building the Bench, about recruiting volunteer subs. But this podcast is coming out in the midst of the season of coronavirus, and churches aren't, meeting in person. And so the other thing that we talk about, which will be helpful even when things get back to quote unquote normal, is kids ministry online. What are some new and unique ways that we can minister to kids and to families while we're not gathering? And then hopefully, as Jarrod talks about, continue that when things go back to gathering in person again. Now, before we jump into that episode, as always, you can get the links and notes and things like that at nickblevins.com/episode 185. And I'm excited to bring to you our very first podcast sponsor, which is going to be Serve HQ. They make the resource called Trained Up, which I've talked about here on the podcast before. We've had Scott on to talk about that. Then they created a new resource as part of that kind of bundle called Huddle Up. And before I jump into those, I just want you to know that anything that I ever talk about on the podcast and push you or consider, encourage you to check out, it's because I believe in it. Most of the time, like with Trained Up, it's because we use it and I believe in it. And so I'm never going to share anything on this podcast that I don't think would be helpful to you. And I'm going to talk a little bit about what Serve HQ has in both of those things. And we'll talk about it over the next number of podcasts and things like that. But just know that we use this in our church. We love what Scott creates. It's a great resource. Many of you probably heard of Trained Up, which is kind of an online training platform for volunteers, but you may not have heard of Huddle Up. Huddle Up centralizes your communication with teams, with groups, with volunteers in a safe way. So think about email, text messages, chats. Churches use all kinds of things, right? Individual emails and texts. Maybe they use group emails like MailChimp or something like that. Maybe they use GroupMe, to group text messages together, or Slack. I don't personally know of a church that uses Slack for volunteer communication, but who knows? Huddle Up is an app that brings all that together, and it's safe because there's accountability. All of that communication is saved, which is great. It unites it on one platform. There's a mobile app, and you can use it on online, so you can send updates to your team, but decide which team members are getting that. You can start chats with groups or one-on-one. And the key thing about all of it is it's centralized and it's safe and it's secure. And you can check that out at nickblevins.com/huddleup. And that and the Trained Up product, which we know and love, are all under the same Serve HQ banner. And you can check that out at nickblevins.com/servehq. Now let's go ahead and jump into my conversation with Jarrod Harris about online kids ministry and recruiting volunteer subs. Today I'm talking with Jarrod Harris. Welcome to the podcast, Jarrod.
Hey, Nick. Thanks so much for having me. It's my pleasure.
You bet. And as we get rolling, as we do with all our guests, love for you to have you introduce yourself. Tell us about yourself, your family, your church, which people, if they've listened to the podcast, are quite familiar with your church because we've had multiple folks on before. But tell us anyway.
Yeah. So Jarrod Harris from Gilbert, Arizona. We have moved around the country quite a few times. Me and my wife met 14 years ago as part of a nonprofit. We met doing variety shows out in Tennessee, as well as traveling around the country doing character education stuff for kids in elementary schools, singing in churches. It was all volunteer. And so we met at a time and got married at 21 and 22 years old. We were making $50 a week between the two of us. It's pretty crazy. And,
awesome.
And so we, and transitioned into being students as well. So we got tuition for going to school. So that's how we met. Like full-time ministry was just part of our lives, and then felt God calling into local church ministry. So I've been in ministry in Mississippi, Tennessee, Texas, New Mexico, and now Arizona. This has become home for us. We have been in Arizona now for 5 years, and it's been amazing. We love the weather out here. Gotten to work with some amazing staffs across the country, but started out in student ministry. I've been around the kids ministry world for so long. Sometimes my wife reminds me, like, you remember where we started, right? And it was in a small church in rural Mississippi, and I was a student and kids person and kind of doing everything, and really felt like God was pushing us towards reinventing what ministry looked like for us. We thought students, because that was my heart passion at the time, but realized like it was kind of too late. It was a little too late sometimes when you were having conversations with kids about some of the things they were struggling with, the relationships that they had with their parents. And so had some amazing people in my life kind of speak into that, say like, hey, what's God doing in your heart? And I said, I really feel like I'm supposed to be focused more on kids. And so started learning and training and being groomed by some great ministry leaders from around the country and asking great questions, and then just started diving into what kids ministry looks like. So anything birth through, 5th, 6th grade, I lived and breathed it and was introduced to lots of different people. One of them being Kenny Conley, and he helped kind of mentor and put me on some paths towards even better conversations with other people. I think, Nick, that's how we met, is through Kenny. Yeah. So I have the amazing privilege. He moved to Arizona about 2.5 years after I did. Maybe 2 years. Yeah. 2 years after we moved out here. And then he ended up on staff at a church out here and said, why don't you come on over and let's work together. So we had already been friends for several years and have been able to continue that friendship and now in ministry. So it's been really exciting. Currently overseeing elementary ministry at Mission Community Church alongside some great people, and having a lot of fun out here, kind of reinventing what kids ministry looks like in the current season that we're in.
Yeah, we've had Kenny on the podcast a few times, more than a few times probably, as he likes to brag. He pretends like his episodes are the most listened to. That is not true, so don't tell Kenny, anybody that's listening, in case he's wondering, because that would probably break his heart. But we've also had your student ministry folks on, which has changed a lot because they've transitioned now, and so you guys are diving in more there. So it'd be good. And of course, we've talked, anytime Kenny's on, we've talked about Mission Church, at least the last, 3 years that he's been there. But we haven't, dove in and talked kids ministry. But in light of the current season that we're in with coronavirus and churches meeting digitally only, and it just, is getting escalating each week. The day we're recording, my state kind of did a stay-at-home order. It had been an encouragement. Now it's an order, I'd love to hear, what are you doing online for kids ministry, and like how are you navigating this time? If somebody listens a year from now, they'll probably skip this part and fast forward, which is fine. But what are you guys doing right now at church, with kids ministry and engaging parents and helping them lead their kids at home?
Yeah, it's really personal right now, I'll say that. So my wife and I, like I said, we've been married for 13 years now. We've got 3 beautiful girls. They're 10, 8, and 9 months old right now. And these girls are feeling the distance from everybody right now. And so not just for the rest of our church, but like for me as a parent, like I feel this obligation to try and find ways for them to stay connected. Now, it's funny that you say like in the current season and that people may fast forward, but I really feel like this has provided a great opportunity for churches to reevaluate. Like, are we using technology to its fullest? Are we empowering our volunteers to stay connected to our community and to their groups and things like that through technology? And when kids don't show up, the reality is, we've got kids showing up once every, I think is the current statistic that it's like once every 3 weeks, maybe even less than that.
Yeah, that sounds about right. I know for a while I heard, it was funny because it's such a weird number that people would say, but it was like 1.6 times a month. Which is about every 3 weeks. When we have measured it, because I have measured before, we're in that 40 to 45%. The average kid comes 40 to 45% of the time. So
yeah. So we've been challenged. Like, how do we engage kids? How do we engage the community through a digital platform in light of all the current circumstances? But thinking about it this way, I had a great conversation with Justin Edge over at Life Church, and he has said that during this season, they're going to do their best not to create anything that they won't continue to do afterwards. And I think it's a great thought, and it's a great strategy in this season, because we could be developing tons of things and energy and resources going into things, and then we stop them. And so we're trying to think here at Mission through the lens of, what are we going to start that we would want to continue? What are the habits? What are the strategies that we want to use right now? And yes, they'll be tweaked to some degree once we are able to meet back on campus on the weekends. But how are we empowering volunteers now that we still want them to continue to do after we're able to meet again? And so a couple of things that I'll point out that we've been able to kind of hone in on are, number one, online services and what that looks like for kids. Personalized, not just press play and watch a certain curriculum, whether that's Orange or that's Kids on the Move, like Elevation, whatever it is that all these churches may be using around the country right now. Whatever it is, not just press play, but how we personalize what we do for online services. Number two is we're leaning in to use YouTube in a couple of environments and specifically for elementary age, to create a show that engages them and their family. A weekend service is, more towards the kids, but then something for the family as well. And then number three is how we're utilizing groups through Zoom or Google Hangouts for leaders to connect with kids throughout the week. So those are a couple of things that we're doing. So kind of start with the online services. We really felt it necessary for us to personalize in our environments. Our volunteers are the heroes, not the staff. And I think that's something that we wanted to make sure that we kept going. So very easily we could have said, hey, we're going to use staff to do the intros, the outros, the teachings, and even the recaps. We structured our elementary services to have a opening kind of host moment, just like they would on a normal weekend. And then the teaching time, we've used a curriculum video. We use Orange here. And then we moved into worship, time of worship. Maybe that would go before and after, or just before. And then we would have a host close out the service. So about a 20-minute interaction. Actually, that's been for all kids, for preschool, lower elementary, which is our kinder through third grade, and then fourth, fifth, and sixth grade for our preteens. And we've kind of structured it all the same way. And those host moments, those live moments, we've used a staff member or we've used volunteers. We even used volunteers to say, hey, film yourself on your phone, just giving a message to the kids. And then we've included that during those services online for the weekend, because it gives them that personal interaction, that personal engagement. And it leans in, it helps volunteers be invested in what's going on still. So we didn't want volunteers to feel like they didn't have anything to do during this time.
So are these live online with kids content? Because a lot of people are putting kids content online for parents to use at home, but it's not live. As you're hitting play on something, watching it when you want. What's that look like for you guys?
Yeah, so we are pre-recording. So every week right now, and in the coming weeks, when we kind of know how many weeks we may be doing this for, we'll go ahead and program out and record a few at the same time. But for right now, it's week to week. And week to week, we record these during the week on stage. We keep social distancing. I know that's physical distancing. We still want to be social, but physical distancing. When we have some volunteers come in, they go on a stage with a boom mic. They keep, and then we record it and we capture that. And again, or they record it on their phone at home if it's just a quick blurb or a message. And then we send that to an editing team, and they kind of splice all the videos together, or I'll do some of that editing if necessary. And so this is all pre-recorded, and then we post it the night before for families to be able to start watching. And then we say, hey, go online with us live at 9 o'clock during our normal service times, 9, 10:30, 11:59 on a Sunday morning. And so that's when a lot of people do watch it, is when the adult services are live, because those are live on Sunday morning for the first one, and the others are recorded from the first service. That's for adults. So when the adult services are going, the kids are watching this service for themselves.
Okay. Yeah, and that's what a lot of folks are doing. I like that you're adding personal touch to it. What about the YouTube show? Tell me about that.
Yeah. So my heart behind anything that we've been doing recently has been, how are we helping kids and families continue the conversation? More than ever during this time, it's going to be a realization for the church in general, is that we are not the spiritual leaders. We are here to partner with parents and empower them to be the spiritual leaders in their home. And so what can we do? What can we do to do that? Most families, I'll say this, that we know of, they are not sitting and watching the entire kids service together. Parents are watching. We are in an upwardly mobile, very affluent, area of the country where they have multiple screens that they can put their kids on, whether it's a phone or a computer. And so they don't have to say, we are only going to watch one. The parents will watch theirs. The kids will go in another room and watch theirs. A few families participate all together, but we needed a way to say, hey, this experience is going to be geared towards the older elementary, but it is going to engage the family. And so we're structuring it like you would see the So-and-So show, which is through Orange, but with more personal interaction, with saying, hey, this is what we want you to do this week. We would love for you to send in your pictures or videos of you doing this. And every week's going to be different. We'll have some weeks they will give us a talent. Maybe it is a lip sync battle. It could be, do this, show us your dog doing a trick. For those of you who have pets, show your pets doing tricks. And then every week after we get all those videos, we'll choose a winner. We'll highlight some of those videos, and then that prompts them to watch the next week as we are gathering all of that together. And we can say, hey, from this week, here's our winner from this last week's challenge. We're also kind of structuring it to where it is a repeat of the curriculum for the weekend. From the weekend. So just in case kids did miss it, or just in case, and I say miss it, it is live and available to be watched online at all times. But if they watch that, but they kind of want a little bit more in depth, then we have the opportunity to show the video again. So we will have the intro, game time, fun stuff for this show, just kind of sitting at a table and interacting, myself, Kenny, another one of our volunteers or another one of our staff members, from a distance, talking with one another. And then we'll move into, hey, we're going to recap, we're going to watch this video, and then we'll be back in a few minutes. So they will watch the lesson again, or they can skip over it and watch the rest of the show. So this is really still in development, but we wanted it to be something where if they watch the morning, this could be a recap for them, or it's a time for their entire family to sit down and watch it for the first time.
That's cool. Has it started yet? Like, did you do it last week?
No, it will launch live starting this weekend.
Yeah, that's cool. Now, of course, by the time people listen to this, at least one will be up. It'd be fun to, maybe we'll link to it in the show notes or something if people want to go check it out and see what it's like and get a feel for it.
Yeah, missionaz.org/live is really how we have been promoting everything that we're doing online for kids, families, students even. And so there are links directly to like YouTube Premiere for our student ministry, our youth ministry. For kids, our web team has developed it to where it can be embedded directly on our page. And so we just go, the families click play, and it plays the entire service for that age group, whether it's preschool, lower elementary, or upper elementary.
That's cool. Now, what about the groups? You mentioned groups too. What are you guys doing there?
Groups obviously are so important. The continued connection for families is something that we are passionate about. And if I'll be honest, like, we don't have it all together. Like, I have conversations pretty much every week with different ministry leaders around the country. How can we do groups? How can we keep leaders connected more? Because depending on your church size, you may have a ratio of, 10 to 1, 1 leader per 10 kids. But pretty much on average, all across, the board with larger churches, is you have that 1.6 that come every other week, that's how many times they come during the month. And so how do you keep the connection with all of those kids? So we went through and we did a deep dive into how often kids are coming, did an analysis of all of that, how often they're checking in, and took the most consistent of the kids. We would love to be able to do it for every single kid, but at this point, we just took the most consistent kids and we sent out the group lists, like the parent lists that we can take from our database, and we sent those over to the leaders and said, here are a couple of things that you can do. You don't have to do these specific, but we would just want you to stay connected in some way. So we kind of gave them some prompts. They could either write a card and send it out to the address that was in there. They could send a text message to each of the families, at minimum, send a text message. But some of them have leaned in and they've done individual videos for the consistent kids coming to their group. And so they've taken 15, 30 seconds, a minute even, and they've just had a quick video chat, so to speak. They've just said, this is messages specifically for, you. And so I actually oversee our special needs ministry as well, our ministry to special needs kids. And I had the amazing opportunity to do this for them because our group leaders needed kind of an example. So I said, you know what, I'm going to set the stage. I'm going to do this for our 20 so kids that come through our environment for special needs. And I was getting choked up. Like I was getting overwhelmed with sending these messages because I was thinking of looking them in the eye and saying like how much we miss them. And it's those touch points that have mattered so much. Just over the past couple of weeks, we have had leaders empowered to have more ownership with the relationships with these kids than they ever had coming to be on campus every single weekend. Because it was programmed. I had a good conversation with somebody, and I said, if the only interaction that you're having with kids is on the weekends, then it's not a relationship; it's a programmed interaction. That's all it is. It's you have programmed out. They come during this time. They show up, and so you're there having relationship, but it's just really an interaction. The relationship happens outside of the weekend. It really does.
Yeah, absolutely. And now you're right. Now's the best time for it because you're not even spending time on the weekend. Some folks are busier, but a lot of folks have more time on their hands, right? So it's a great time to maximize that. Do you have any way that you're asking them to kind of share back their stories so you can hear like how it's going?
Oh, yes, absolutely. So we use GroupMe as a platform for our volunteer teams. It's a great platform to be able to have your teams all together chatting back and forth. And so we use GroupMe for all of our interaction with our team members, our coaches, and our volunteers. We have a coach structure that has helped some of this as well, because our coaches are actually the ones championing and empowering that group of volunteers to be the ones interacting with their kids. Again, it's not perfect. We still have some groups that we're like, "Are you kidding? Why haven't you reached out to your kids yet?" And that's when we are leaning in. And so to keep everybody on the same page, we've used GroupMe and we've used text message. But when we are sending to families, the volunteers, as they are receiving these messages back, as they're sending them out, we say, "Hey, drop one of the messages that you've used, to send to a family, and drop it in GroupMe so that we can all see how you are interacting and kind of the messages that you're sharing with families." And then as they are receiving messages back, they're also posting through there. So sometimes they're too big. I had a volunteer just recently send a 3-minute video that she wanted to send out to all the kids in her group, and she couldn't send it all out. And I was like, "There's a reason why. It's 3 minutes. We need to cut it back just a little bit." But I want to engage that volunteer to now take it a step further. So they're sending videos back to us, things like that. But the ones that are super engaged, like my own daughter's small group leader, they're one of our guinea pigs, but they have already set up a Zoom call for their group for this week. So this will be the first week that they do it. And so in the midst of everything that's going on, this group of 5th grade girls is still going to meet, but they're going to do it through Zoom. And, we see that in a lot of the student world, but we don't see that a lot in kids because it's like, well, do kids really need that interaction? It's like, absolutely. They need that interaction probably more than students do. Students can most of the time have their phones attached to them and have that social interaction via TikTok and Instagram and through video chats. But kids, they need parents to help them do that. And so we have enabled and empowered our volunteers to reach out to families and say, hey, now this is the next step. I've sent these messages to you, but I want to stay connected during this time. And so let's set up a weekly time for us to meet. And we have scheduled out a couple of those already. But then there's one more layer to it, is that we are setting up weekly interactions with grade levels. And so kindergarten is going to be at a specific time for about 20, 25, probably 15, 20 minutes during a specific day, where we say all kindergartners, at this service time, let's say it's 9:00 service, you guys all jump on. Your parents and your families, all of you kindergartners from this service time, jump on at this time. And some of your leaders are going to be on, some of our staff are going to be on, and we're just going to do a quick checkup. We're going to say hi, we're going to pray for you, and we're going to help you see all the other kids that you would normally see on a weekend. And then the next 20 minutes is the next grade level. So we'll go kinder, first, second, third, all the way through sixth grade if necessary, to allow these kids to see the other kids that they've been missing. So we are providing a couple of different opportunities for these Zoom calls to be happening with the leaders and with our staff, because they need that interaction. The videos are going to be fine. That's great, but it's not the one-on-one personal touch where I see you and I hear you and I know what's going on and I can see you wave, and real quick your mom or dad is going to walk by in the background and say hi, and that's great, or your little brother or sister or your dog, and you're going to be like, and this is my dog. Like, these kids, their worlds are rocked right now. But I'm thinking about it and saying, like, the reality is, like, we could be doing this all the time to provide this connection, especially if kids miss. If kids are missing every single weekend, then how do we make these touch points available to parents and families throughout the week?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You and I were on a Zoom call last week with Ministry Boost members. And remember the one, our one friend was talking about how she did Zoom calls with kids, and the older kids group, it worked pretty well. The younger ones, a little harder, which that makes sense. We did our first Zoom thing with students, actually, middle school, high school last night. And, even with that age, there's challenges, but man, it was so worth it. It was so good. It was really good. And so I definitely encourage people to find ways to connect like that. And really what you're talking about too is empowering, the volunteers and small group leaders to make that connection, which is in some ways what we originally want to talk about when we said, let's get you on the podcast weeks ago, months ago. I don't know how long it's been. It feels like it's been a long time. Way before coronavirus and all that, we were saying, hey, Jarrod, why don't you come on the podcast and talk about your course with Ministry Boost about recruiting volunteer subs? It's called Building the Bench. Great name. But tell us about what the course is, and then we're going to dig into it a little bit in terms of what it looks like at your church. I guess you're going to be giving us some exclusive content from the course or something. I don't know. But I just want to hear about how it actually works. But describe the course for folks listening.
Yeah, absolutely. The Building the Bench came from the idea that every single weekend in church ministry, one of the key roles for ministry leaders, whether you're staff, full-time, part-time, in preschool, elementary, no matter what it is you're filling gaps. You're filling up the gaps because you have the dreaded call-outs. You have the people that call out on Friday, Saturday, Sunday morning, 2 minutes before service, and you have people that aren't available to come in. Then throughout the year, they also call out because of sickness, because of vacations, because of various things. We have a high number of students that serve in our environments for elementary age kids. And when prom or homecoming hits, it's like none of them show up. It's crazy. And we have so many different schools represented, they could be on any given weekend over the course of a month. So how do we help all of these leaders, no matter what the season of ministry is, no matter what time of year it is, to have backups? Because most of the time, staff are the ones that are helping fill those gaps. They're calling in favors. They're calling in last-minute spouses to come in and serve. They're asking executive team members on staffs, will you please just sit in here in a room? We need a warm body. And so instead of kind of being reactive to everything going on. This course is about being proactive in building your bench. In a baseball terminology, these people are like your pinch runners. They don't have to run your groups every single weekend of the year, but they are there just in case your leader can't be there. And then on the side of that, it also produces a conversation that if they don't want to be a sub on an ongoing basis, then how could they plug in a different way? Really, the course is about turning people who would normally say no to volunteering into saying yes in some way. Because if you've been serving in ministry for any length of time, I'll say it, the majority of people don't end up going through the entire process to onboard and become a volunteer, because sometimes we make it difficult, we make it arduous, we make it hard, and there's a healthy balance there. You don't want people who are flippant and are gonna call out, so you want it to be something that they know is valuable, but you also don't want it to be something that turns people away from serving when they want to serve in some way, but maybe they can't do it every single weekend. Or maybe even do it every other weekend. So the course kind of walks through a creative strategy to building that bench and helping people get on your team who normally would have probably said no because they can't commit to the same time frame as everybody else.
Now you have, like, the way you do it in practice at Mission is you have these subs come and serve. It's not like a lot of folks have some kind of process where they have a list of people they can contact to sub in and volunteer when it's needed. Is that how you do it? Or is it the way you do it is they show up once a month or whatever it is to serve, just assuming that they're going to be needed? Because I've seen both methods.
Yeah, there's a couple of strategies that you can go at with this. And that's the beauty of it is you can take your current sub list and do this however you want. The strategy that we saw was best for us to even say, like, here's the sub list. Now I'm going to need to call. Instead, we empowered our volunteers for the communication to these subs. So when we did this recruitment challenge with this sub recruitment to build the bench, we said it's a contest. The team that recruits the most volunteers during this time frame will win something. I think we sent them all to Topgolf so that they could go and do that. And we took care of kids if they had kids. Actually, the team that won, this will surprise you. Well, maybe it won't surprise you, but the team that won was a bunch of high school girls. And so we had
that does not surprise me, actually. Yeah, they probably have way more people they could ask.
Yeah, and so they asked lots of different people to come and sub. And I think through this recruitment challenge for the subs, the first time that we did it, we were able to recruit around 14 to 15 new potential volunteers. And some of those ended up becoming full-time volunteers because they loved it so much. And so what we did was we said, for the volunteers, you are the ones responsible for reaching out and recruiting the subs. We will not do that. We will take care of training them, but you guys are going to be the ones that reach out. And so then we said, here's the way to identify the people that you can call, the people that you can contact. We even in this course, we kind of map out, here's a text that you could have sent from a adult small group leader or a teenage small group leader to the parents of the kids in the group. Now, what's more appealing than having somebody stand on a stage and say, hey, we need volunteers in our kids ministry, is having the small group leader of your own child call you and say, hey, I'm going to be out of town a couple of weeks this summer because of this, because of that, because of a competition. I know that I'm not feeling well this week. Would you mind subbing for me? And so we have taken the reins out of our hands and put them in the hands of the leader to say, you reach out to the parent and say, hey, will you come and sub for me this weekend? And these parents came out of the woodwork saying, oh my gosh, I would love to sit in and help lead my kids' small group. I only have to do that once every 2 months. That's awesome. I am totally in to do that. And so these parents became even more involved in the spiritual development of their kids because they were empowered by the small group leader to come in and own that. Now, again, there's a lot of things behind the scenes that need to happen. They still go through training. They still go through background check. They still go through an orientation. They observe so they can see how the group is run. But we're not telling them that they have to have continued relationship with these kids every single week. They are just a pinch runner. They are just a sub to fill in during the times that the leader can't be there.
Yeah, and the course kind of walks people through that, right? Gives them worksheets. You have teaching videos, and then there's like worksheets and exercises they can do to kind of basically run that same play or a version of that same play that you guys have run over the years to build the bench there.
Yeah, in some of the courses on Ministry Boost, Nick, that you have led, there are so much great content that you guys have provided through Ministry Boost when it comes to being able to track volunteers. Volunteer Playbook was actually something that prompted some of this. That was a course that's been out. I think it's one of the ones that you guys give away sometimes because it's so valuable. But it prompted this conversation about subs because it called us to start quantifying the amount of leaders we had, that we truly had, the dedicated ones, and then saw all the gaps that we have, the percentages of where we really needed more leaders, and then it really just caused us to say, what is our process for getting these people in to serve? And we were making it way too difficult. We were making it way too difficult for somebody to say, I'll sub every now and then, or I'll just be a part of this. We were treating them the same way that we would a regular volunteer, and that made it difficult for them to get onboarded. So we changed a little bit of what we need to do while still upholding all of our safety procedures and standards, as well as our strategy for it being about a small group leader connecting with and communicating with parents on a regular basis. And this it reinforced the relationship even more by doing something like this. And again, it's all about being proactive about this instead of reactive, being proactive about going out and recruiting these people. And it also, I'm able to walk through in the course the identifiable pools of people to pull from, because there are so many different pools of people you could target. There are a lot of different people who you may not think would be good for this. There are parents who would be great for this, college students who can't commit to it. The older crowd, think of your 55 plus group. There are a lot of people in your church that they may not have the energy to do this every single week, but they would come in and sub once every now and then to help out, and they would be perfect for this. So, it really just shifts perspective on, instead of the no's from so many people, it turns those no's into yeses.
Yeah. And I mean, the polls that you talked about and where people can look for folks like that is really helpful. And then one of my favorite things about this course, but any of our courses that do this, is like the template emails and texts. And I like how you call it gamification, like how you kind of turn the whole thing into a process of almost like a game or a contest or whatever, so that, and we've done this before in a pinch, but not just with subs. We've, years ago, we had like a competition among our preschool team to recruit more volunteers because we'd moved into a building and just needed to grow the team fast. And there's something to that. So doing that mixed with it being about subs, or even in some case, and then going to the next level, maybe where sometimes the subs, I know some folks do have subs that are there every week. There's a certain number of subs. And so it's kind of like they're once a month volunteers, but they end up being sub volunteers for small group leaders who'd normally be there every week. And, it's just a good process overall. And what you said, being proactive about it, that is what's helpful, because in a pinch, it's hard to get people. You're spending time on other things, just plugging holes, so much less preparing for the future. So I love the whole idea behind it. Anything else you'd add about what it looks like at your church or the course or any of that?
Well, I mean, at the heart of it is this. It's all of your volunteers catching the same vision. I can't tell you how many times over the years, and even since we've done this strategy of helping leaders recruit their own subs so that when they're going to be out, they're the ones filling their own gap that they're going to miss, because that's what causes burnout for so many volunteers, is because they feel so responsible for, like, I need to communicate that I'm going to be out and I feel bad about it. So I'm calling a staff member to tell them that I've got a sick kid and I can't come in today. Will you please help, fill that gap? And then staff members, that's the majority of their job on a weekend, or the weekend leading up to Sunday, so that we end up burning out as ministry leaders. Like, this could be one of the healthiest things for you in your ministry, because you no longer get those calls on a Friday, Saturday, and are worried about filling the gap on a weekend. Now, mind you, how does this look in this current season right now? I would just say is like, how can you continue to empower leaders to do this right now. Who are the people who are not serving right now? Like your normal volunteers, they should be doing something during this season where churches may not be meeting right now. But if you are a ministry leader and there's a list of people who you were still hoping to get plugged into serving in some way, shape, or form because you had an orientation, I still would encourage continue to do volunteer orientations. Like people are going to want to serve in some way, and people right now could have more time on their hands to serve. So what are the ways that they could serve right now? Instead of just thinking about it from a weekend perspective, oh, okay, this is great, we'll do this when we get back to church as normal. What does it look like for you to go ahead and empower volunteers right now? I just had a conversation with a lady a couple weeks ago. It was still at the beginning of some of our online services beginning, but she is so excited to serve. So before we even go back to church meeting on a regular basis, she is going to be put on a volunteer team, and she's going to start developing relationships with the other leaders on that team. And there could be tasks that I have during the week. Hey, these kids, they came a few times before all of this happened. I would love for you to call these families that aren't consistent in coming or that we haven't tracked as consistent. Would you mind calling them and just seeing how they're doing? Like we can empower volunteers to be doing so much right now during this season that we probably never would have thought that they could do. And it could actually be something that revitalizes our volunteer strategy, our volunteer recruitment, and some of the heart behind why we have people serve in the first place. It's not just to show up on a Sunday morning. It's to be engaged in the lives of families throughout the week.
Absolutely. And building a process like this now would be good. You know, I mean, a lot of us are focused on what we talked about in the first part of the podcast, online kids ministry, engaging that way, connecting volunteers with kids, all that, which is important. But the longer this goes on, the more there is time to work on your ministry a little bit, right, during the season, so that when things come back, you have both and going. You've got this going plus what you used to do. And like you said, a lot of this stuff that we're doing, hopefully it will stay, just like you were saying from that call with Justin, which is, I think, some wise words for sure. Well,
yeah, absolutely.
How can people connect with you? You know, if they have any questions or anything like that?
Connect with me through Instagram. It's Jarrod_Harris. Most of the kids, I say, they see my name tag on a weekend. It's like, what's your name? I was like, just call me Jarrod. It's so much easier because I have a weird spelling, but Jarrod's so much easier. And I grew up in the time when A-Rod was really big in baseball. Yeah, come on, let's go, man. And so I just became J-Rod playing baseball growing up. And so Jarrod_Harris. I'm also on Facebook. Those are the two main ways. And then obviously the Ministry Boost course that is available. It's one of those things that even if you put this in your pocket for later, to do way later down the road, there are so many opportunities to have good conversations about this right now. But you can also email me. You can email me directly, and you can include that in the show notes and stuff like that if you want to, so that people can reach out to me directly.
Cool. Well, thanks, Jarrod, for coming on the podcast, for talking online kids ministry, volunteer subs, building the bench, all that. Appreciate it.
No, it's my pleasure, Nick. Thank you so much for what you do. I'm excited about, what, this podcast brings to ministry leaders. Grateful to be a part of it.
Well, that was a fun conversation with Jarrod. And if you're listening to this now or when it comes out in the midst of churches not gathering and coronavirus and all of that, then you got some good tips there. And I know a ton of churches are learning from each other about what they're doing. And every week, I know in our church, it seems like we're tweaking and adjusting, adding something, taking something away, just trying things out to see what works best. And a few action items I thought of coming out of that interview include checking out a kids ministry YouTube show. What church, and Jarrod talked about that with their church. Where can you check out something like that and see if that might be a fit for you and for your ministry? Another action step would be empower small group leaders to connect with kids more during this time. That's true anytime, right? That was true a year ago. That'll be true 3 years from now. But if you're listening to this during the season we're in right now, where we're not gathering, how could small group leaders connect more with the kids they lead, whether that's high school, preschool, elementary, middle school, whatever? And then the third action step would be to check out Building the Bench and maybe check that course out, We have membership. It's not open right now, and most churches are on a spending freeze right now, but you don't have to check out that course to take one of the ideas that Jarrod said and to implement them. And the one I'm thinking about is a contest where you get your team to recruit volunteer subs, and maybe you'll plan now to do that in the fall and get all the communication and the schedule and the plans and all that together now, so that as soon as it comes summer, late summer, fall, and hopefully churches are meeting again and you're needing to recruit volunteers, and who knows what it's going to be like as we get back to that, you probably are going to need some more volunteers, and that could be something that you do this fall. As I mentioned in the beginning, check out Serve HQ, and they're offering their products Trained Up and Huddle Up, and you can check those out at nickblevins.com/servehq. Thanks for listening. Hope this was helpful. Hang in there. Continue leading if you're listening to this again when it comes out. Continue leading and exploring and innovating, and more than anything, connecting with people. And that's a focus at our church for sure. So I hope that's a focus for you as well. But thanks for taking time to listen to this podcast. I hope it's helpful all the time, but certainly in this season that we're in. And thanks for sharing it, leaving ratings and reviews on Apple Podcasts and all that, or wherever you listen. That is much appreciated. So have a good week, and we'll catch you next week on the Family Ministry Podcast.
Thanks for listening to the Nick Blevins Family Ministry Podcast. We hope this helps you maximize your church's potential. We would love to hear stories of how you apply what you've learned. You can do that by leaving a comment on iTunes or in the show notes at nickblevins.com.